It's never easy quitting your job and going all in on a business. However, when you have the right people around you, say your wife and your mum being your supporting cheerleaders and backbenchers, then it makes it a little bit easier. On today's podcast, I had the pleasure of welcoming on Toby Henry. He is the now CEO, after acquiring the business, of Accelerator Solutions. We hopped on this podcast and we discussed in a very candid nature what it's like quitting your job, going all in on your business and backing yourself. And in today's society, there are so many people who are afraid of going all in on themselves and betting on themselves. And I really question, why is that? Episode 95 of the Grappling Growth podcast is a special one. It's a treat. Enjoy. As entrepreneurs, we all experience challenges in our business journey. I'm Joe Testori, and the Grappling Growth podcast is my attempt at documenting my entrepreneurial journey while building my brands. I sit down with fellow entrepreneurs, understanding how they grapple with growth. I hope you find value and enjoy. Toby, pleasure to have you on the pod.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, really nice to meet you. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Just down the road as well. Toby,
Yes.
I'm curious, what does growth look like to you?
Well, what a great question to start. I think for me, growth, it means a lot of things, actually. I think when I think about my career and what it means to me now, it means about creating something that's going to outlast me as an individual. I moved careers fairly recently over the last year and a half, and prior to that, growth had meant the next career step, a bigger salary, a bigger title, more span of control. And I decided to kind of not do that anymore and went into doing something slightly different. And now growth means building something. I went through an entrepreneurship through acquisition route, acquired a company, and I'm looking to grow that company into a holding company over a period of time. So yeah, growth means that aspect from a business perspective, but also from a personal perspective. Big believer in continuous learning and growth, and what I've done over the last couple of years definitely stretched that growth aspect of kind of me personally. So yeah, personal and professional, I think is quite a difficult one to manage generally.
So I love the narrative then, and that was one of the things that piqued my interest about our conversation a couple of days ago. What was the catalyst for you mentally saying, I'm in a pretty stable position, life's going pretty well, money's good titles, and the things with a lot of things to do with entrepreneurship is you have to take quite a few steps back, and it's not as though most of the time you're going from, you might be in level 10 of the employment game, and you might come down to level 4 or 5. What was the spark? What was the catalyst mentally to say, actually, I'm willing to bet on myself, take these steps back, acquire a business, and go all in on this?
So there was a couple of things. I was a management consultant for a long time, like 10 years, and then I moved into scale up fintech world. And part of that journey was I always felt like there was a next step, there was a growth opportunity. I was doing something interesting, particularly when I moved out of consulting into fintech. I worked at a company where we were building banks from scratch, and it was just such a huge learning curve. And I got to the point in my career, my last job, where I felt like my learning had plateaued a little bit. And I am quite a risk forward person. And for a little while, I thought I wanted to do something on my own, entrepreneurial, but I didn't know what it was. Like, I'm not a big ideas guy. I wasn't like, I'm going to go start the next fintech or company. And, I've got 2 kids and a family. And to your point, I'd got to a place in my career where comfort may have set in a little bit. You're earning a good salary, you've got a good title. And I was sat on the train one day going into London, and the people I just sat around, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with this, it's just not for me. Late 60s, commuting into London on a really awful November day, just looking like they absolutely hated life. And the thought of doing that scared me more than then taking the risk. And that was one of the catalysts, along with the job I was doing at the time. It wasn't as fulfilling as I thought it would be. I maybe chased the money and the title and what looked like good growth from a personal perspective, but actually it wasn't what I expected it to be. And those two things in combination, I came home that night and chatted to my wife and said, I think I want to do something. I was like, I'm still not sure. And then, I'm a big believer in, you get lucky opportunities or breaks or something happens, and about being aware of it and taking that opportunity. And I saw that someone in my network had quit their job and looked like they'd started a fund. I didn't understand what they'd done because, again, they looked on the outset, they had a great job. They were a COO of a fintech that was growing super fast. And I reached out to him and said, I don't understand what you've done, but it looks pretty cool. And he opened up this door to search funds and entrepreneurship through acquisition, which the concept behind it is you can go and buy a profitable small business and transfer someone else's legacy that they've spent years and years building. So you don't have to start from scratch and start from zero and have that big idea. And that was a big unlock for me. And once that had happened, I was like, okay, I can actually do this. And then it was just about, actually doing it and taking the risk. And my wife said to me, just do it. She was like, what's the worst that can happen? I was like, well, we might lose the house. And she was like, no, we won't. It will never happen. Just go and back yourself. So that was nice as well.
I love that. I love the narrative there. And I think there's so many things to unpack there. But first off, what's your wife's name?
Lucy.
Credit to Lucy, because I think, as they say, behind every strong man is an even stronger woman. And I would hazard a guess, if you had a wife partner who wasn't supportive there, then you probably wouldn't have backed yourself, because you're going to finish up these dark days, these long days running your business and think, fuck, what's the point of all of this? And why don't I go back to my comfy job and the security and there's risk? And so I've been running my business now for 8 years full time. And I used to work in banking. So I was in Canary Wharf, and I remember just that commute that you're talking about. I remember the dreaded commute, and not to judge people, but I was on the tube yesterday myself. And I saw a man in his mid-50s playing, I don't even know what game it was. Call it Candy Crush. It was just where you got the little chips and the tokens, and you need to make the colours match. And I thought, quite honestly, fuck me, I don't do that now. And I guess it's all about your choices. But this is a man in the suit coming back from work, playing games on a tube, and that for me is just never an aspiration. That is not freedom. That is not how I want to be spending my time. And I think a lot of that, especially when I talk to younger entrepreneurs or people who are trying to make decisions, I really believe the things that you're doing in your extracurricular, whether that is, and you've got choices, you could go to the gym, you could watch Netflix, and it's all your decisions. And you're older than I am, so I'd be curious and I'm intrigued to get your perspective. I'm a 30-year-old man. What advice would you give to someone entering their 30s about the decisions they make on a daily basis?
I think you just made two really super points there, Joe. One was about the freedom aspect of it. And I think we all think we want the freedom or think we have freedom. And then I think as you get a little bit older, you realize that your lack of control over your life is slowly slipping away. And that's how I felt, even though from the outside looking in, got a very strong family unit, great job on paper, nice house, all the things that you aspire to have probably when you're in your 20s, 30s. It was like tick, 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 but I didn't feel that level of fulfillment. And I think if I could have gone back and spoke to myself in my 30s, so I had I was actually chatting to my wife about this the other day. I was like, at what point in your career did you think you were valuable to the company you worked at? And I reckon it took me about 8 to 9 years of working full time to feel like I was a net giver than a net taker. So I felt that kind of early 30s was probably the most significant point in my career where I was doing the biggest amount of growth and was able to, command a bit more respect in a room, win bigger contracts, and actually start to have an opinion because you've got a little bit of time behind you. But I think it's very easy to go from being like 30 to 40 and feel like you've treaded water a little bit because you haven't had that energy and the push that you had in your 20s. Work isn't exciting anymore. And what I found is I really anchored my career in working with really, really smart people. It's the thing that always gave me the most energy, working with people. And someone said to me once, like, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room. And the opportunity I had both from a consulting perspective and then fintech meant that I always felt like I was learning. And to the point you were just making, I'm a massive believer in, going to the gym or exercising, having time doing something that you love. you probably heard the phrase like bring your whole self to work. And I'm not a big believer and fan of that, because there are parts of my personal life that I don't want to bring to work, and things that, make me happy outside of work that I don't want to carry into work. And I think it's about finding, what gives you energy. I wouldn't say I necessarily have a passion. People say that if you find your passion, you'll never work a day in your life. And I think, again, that's probably a little bit, I actually have never met anyone, regardless of how good their job looks on the surface, whether that's a professional sports person or, like a model or social media influencer. They all have differences in terms of the pressures and what that looks like. And I think if you can find the balance between doing something you enjoy and you feel like you're growing, and like, I love working with people, so that was a big part of mine. And over the last couple of years, I've definitely worked out what gives me more energy, like the times that I work, going to the gym in the morning, working out, and then working a bit later in the evening, or vice versa. I think that's a big. If I wish someone had said that to me when I was in my early 30s, like, find what gives you energy, find the times when you feel like you have energy, and then align to that. And then I find the work becomes a little bit easier then.
Yeah. You touched upon something there where you said it was probably in your early 30s, about 8, 9 years in, where you found, or you felt as though you commanded respect, or I guess, I think for a lot of younger people, it's the imposter syndrome. It's thinking of, what do I bring to this company? And I think a lot of it is just a very easy reference and frame, but it's competence builds confidence. And
Yeah.
the more times you put the reps in whatever you're doing, the more times you know how to do something. If you're trying to do something the first time, the first ever podcast that I shot here, it was dog awful, but I realized that done is better than perfect. And it's a case of, realistically, if someone comes over and looks at the work that I did, I mean, we're nearly 3 years in now, and they laugh, I don't care. That's more for you, because at least I'm putting the reps in. And I know we're nearly at 100 podcasts, and I think this is the 95th one we've done. And I can see a progressive improvement as to what we've done. But if I romanticized or I theorized as to, oh, this is how this podcast works or whatever, there's no point being a lazy, ambitious person sitting on the sidelines thinking, maybe this is what it would look like. And we've all got those friends that we meet up with for a drink. Oh man, I've got this idea, or I'm thinking about this. And it's like, well, just try it and give it a go. And as your wife said, Lucy, what's the worst that's going to happen? You said, we'll lose our house. But if you put the same discipline, dedication, persistence, perseverance into your business as you've done into your job, you can again use that competency reference or axis point of, well, I know I did this here for someone else's business. And if someone said you're basically betting your home and your family, well, that should be
Yeah.
enough of a fire under you.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And it's just a nice way of framing it, because that competence and just getting going, and that was one of the hardest parts, was just, I've made a decision. I could have sat and procrastinated on that for months and months and months. And actually, there was a little moment where I'd kind of started to tell a few people who I trusted that I was going to do this, and started searching for companies to acquire. And I was doing this while I had a full-time job at the same time. So I had to be very disciplined with my time and where I attributed that time. My job was super intense at the time as well. So it meant carving out big chunks of my Sunday morning, or getting up early, and being really disciplined about that, because it's something I wanted to do, to your point. And I was chatting to my mum just before Christmas, and I was like, oh, I'm getting a little bit stuck, and I'm on my work laptop, and I'm getting to that point where I shouldn't be really saving files down on here, because it's probably just not the right thing to do. Getting a bit distracted all over the place. And she sent me a laptop in the post the next day, and she called me and she was like, "You have not got an excuse now. Like, you just told me the only thing stopping you is you didn't have like a computer to do it on. I just sent you one." And again, that was a really nice, honest moment of, oh, I probably was like fucking about a little bit and telling people I was going to do something and not actually taking a concrete step forward. And once I had that in place, it was again a bit of a moment for me to go, okay, well, now I've got to double down on this. Someone has invested something in me, and I've told them I'm going to do it, and they're going to hold me accountable, not just my wife. Because if I'd have decided a month later, Lucy would have been like, okay, no skin off my nose, because you've still got your job, and we're still kind of doing what we're doing. And then that begat like a very pacey, like it moved very fast off the back of that from getting to that point, and then it seemed like there was a real momentum behind it. And once the momentum picked up, I went from finding the business that I acquired to putting in a letter of intent to due diligence to closing in about 6 or 7 months. Because I felt like if I stopped, then I would just lose the momentum. And I actually got into a nice rhythm while I was still working of acquiring this company. So yeah, big believer in taking a small step forward and then using that momentum to keep going. And then if you need to pivot and change, or if it fails, like you learn a bunch of stuff and then you go again.
Absolutely. I mean, you've just referenced there that you've got two very strong women as your backbone in there, and I think you said that there's one thing saying I'm going to quit to my partner. Just it's always going to be that 9 o'clock chat, like, oh, I'm thinking about
Yeah,
this, and a bit of it's like, well, come on then, like let's see you do it, and then there's actually I know that mental step when you turn around to people and say, yeah, actually, I'm going to do this, or you tell close friends, they're like, are you sure? And you're saying and there's such a different reference of I'm thinking of doing this to, and people know in your voice when you say I'm doing this, it's the conviction,
it
and
is.
that layer of pushing yourself out. Are you familiar with the parable known as burning the boats?
I am, yeah. And it's something someone said to me actually. That you've got to go past that point of no return. And for me, that felt once I'd gone into due diligence, you are putting till that point, you're just investing your time. There's no money exchanged hands, and you can do it as many times as you want. You could get into a cycle of doing it for years. And I know people who are on this journey have been searching, getting on a multiple number of years. And at that point, there's a massive fatigue, and you just kind of lose the will to, I think, go forward a little bit. When I got into due diligence, someone said to me, "You've now burnt the boats," basically, because you're outlaying a significant amount of money to go through financial and legal due diligence, and then once you own that company, you can't unown the company.
Yeah, it's
And
not a
then
revolving door. Once you're
no,
in there, you're in there, and if you were to sell that business again, it's not you're not going to sell it in 2 weeks. You're not going to say, "Oh, here's my 14-day calling off period. I want to cancel my gym membership." It's
yeah,
no, you're here, mate. I remember when I quit my job, I just I walked into my manager's office and I just said, "Look, thank you. I'm I'm finished here." And I wasn't in a very high level position. This was a very post grad position, but the way how I saw it, and this was uh, the graph that I used. If you imagine in economics, we have supply and demand graphs. I had my age on the x-axis, and then on the y-axis it was time or risk. Sorry, and it was the older I get, the more risk I have in life. Like when you leave uni, what do you really have to worry about, or who do you really have to? No one was well, personally speaking, I can't talk for everyone, but personally for me, very lucky. I was living at home with my parents. I paid them rent every month. I had my gym memberships, but I didn't have dependables. I didn't have kids that I had to pay or give money to and support. I didn't have a mortgage. If I really, really wanted to, I could have gone to Thailand at the time and reduced my costs. And I mention that point because I've got a friend right now, very similar position to you and I, just 25, and he's setting up a business, and I've been helping him with it. And his job's very taxing. He's literally working, I don't know, 10 hours a day. And we were speaking last week, and I just said to him, you just got to go all in. If you want this, you just have to go all in. Because he said to me, I want to quit my job. And I was like, okay, so what you're saying is it's not if, it's when. So what is the real thing that's stopping you? And you've got a few timelines. So he's talking about quitting it now, or just after Christmas, or he's got a tenancy, he's renting a place. And realistically, we know you could go on Spare Room or wherever, turn around, sublet that place out, and that's it. But you just need to figure out your risk appetite. And that's for no one else to tell you. And I always think you can always come with the frame of, if I were in your position, this is what I would do. But never tell someone, well, mate, just quit the job or whatever. It's everyone's discretion, because you don't want them to come back to you and say, well, actually, like, you told me to do this. It's completely your choice. You deal with your own life finances, and you take the risks that work within your parameters.
Yeah, and I think that the thing you just said there, Joe, which is super interesting, sounds like you're giving him some great advice, is what is your risk tolerance and what is the excuse that you're making to not do it? Because if that's a credible reason of something, but there will always be, the timing is never perfect. There will always be oh, I'm going to wait till Christmas because, it might get a bonus, or I'm going to wait until the summer because it might be easier to let my room, or whatever it is. And I went through some of those moments, like seriously, and
What were
I'm
the
probably
moments for you?
like very boring stuff, like my mortgage is coming up for renewal. I was like, should I
Mm.
wait until after the mortgage renewal because then I'll be technically um, self-employed, although I'm the owner of the business.
Did you wait?
No, no,
Love that.
and no, I didn't. I didn't wait. And a little part of me at the time, afterwards, when we went through it ended up working out completely fine. But there was that little bit of, was I a little bit impetuous? Should I have waited? But I just know there would have been something else. Like if I'd have waited for that, I'd have probably waited then to quit my job, because I didn't quit my job until actually we'd finished due diligence. But I was due a bonus in a couple of months after that, so I might have just delayed everything a little bit further. And then you start to string these things out. The people you're buying from get disinterested. They've got other offers on the table. You're spinning out your own cash that you're paying out to lawyers and accountants. So but yeah, I mean, you have to understand that risk. And I spent a lot of time thinking about, and my dad ran his own marketing agency that he exited from when he was kind of in his late 50s, and had a couple of conversations with him about, how do you balance that risk appetite? He had a young family, started it from scratch, and he was like, you never know. And he's like, you can only go with the information that you've got at the time, and you're a smart guy, and you'll make the right choice, or you'll make a choice and it'll become the right choice. And if it doesn't, you'll pivot quite quickly. But he's like, no action is worse than some action, to exactly the point that you were just making it. And it'll never be perfect. The timing will never be perfect. It's like having a kid. Like no one's ready to have a child, and you just have to pick a time that works for you, and then you become a parent and you work it out as you go. And that kind of feels like a good analogy for me post acquisition, where there are things that you're just not ready for. There are bits that shock you or that scare you, and you just have to deal with it and get on with it and learn from it. And the last year has been a massive. I thought I learned a lot when I joined a scale up, just in how fast things moved and the complexity. But being a business owner is no joke, as you probably well know, and the things you have to deal with are varied from day to day, from business development to working with clients to doing things like this, which is probably a little bit more fun than some of the other things you have to do, to people issues and payroll. I thought about all those things, and I've had exposure to them in different parts of my career. But I'd always had a comfort blanket of a boss to go to, or a HR manager, or a legal team. When you're running a small business, like we're like 15 people, there's a lot that you have to do yourself, and that's been a bit of a learning curve for me as well.
Absolutely. And you've raised so many interesting points. Just to pivot the conversation slightly, and please share what you can go into, so to speak, because I've had a few guests on the show who are in private equity, mergers and acquisitions, deal structuring. We spoke about this a few days ago. Mainly, everyone we've spoken to are stateside, and this is something that really, really intrigues me. Looking at acquisitions, uh, with what you can share, how do deal structures typically work in the UK from what you've seen?
Yeah. So if most of your listeners are in the US, they'll probably be pretty familiar with a concept called search funds and entrepreneurship through acquisition. It started in Stanford probably about 30 years ago now, and it's a pretty well-known asset class. It's a bit more nascent in the UK. So the kind of two models that I'm aware of, being a sole acquirer, like I started my own company called Full Circle Capital. That's the vehicle that does the acquisitions. It's by no means a private equity fund. They obviously play on much bigger scales, but the concept is the same. Now, the way I approached it was I went down a self-funded route, so used a combination of equity investment and debt, so borrowed money basically to buy the business. Now, there are so many different levers you can pull from a deal structuring perspective. I've been involved in M&A activity and deal structuring as part of my corporate career, but it was the first time I was doing it on my own. And I had some great advisors who had been around from a corporate finance perspective, who were really helpful in terms of these are the things you can think about. But basically the way I thought about the deal was a couple of like key principles. The first was any business that I acquired, I wanted it to be a partnership because I've been involved in some big deals where one side wins and it's obvious that they've won and the relationship breaks down very, very quickly. So when I was talking to potential targets, I was very clear that one, I would like them to stay in the business for a period of time to make sure the transition happens in a seamless way for the people and the clients.
What was the time period you wanted them to be in the business for?
It was going to be a minimum of 6 months. It ended up being a year, and actually they're still in the business. We just kind of renegotiated the next terms because the partnership is working really well, which is a bit atypical. That's not normally the case in these smaller acquisitions, based on my understanding and people who have done them. And the second was I wanted them to have us to have collectively aligned incentives and skin in the game. So we structured the deal kind of across four main components. The first was around a cash earn out on day one. And if anyone tells you, there's this very disingenuous, I think is probably the right word, narrative at the moment popping up around entrepreneurship through acquisition and buying businesses, that you can buy a business for £1 or buy a business for no money down and you can leverage people. Yeah, you can buy a distressed business for £1. I wouldn't be telling anyone to buy a distressed business for their first business acquisition. If you're putting no money down, you're probably buying the wrong business or a very immature business, or there's something not right. Like if it's too good to be true, it is too good to be true, particularly in this space. So I wanted it to feel like they were getting paid for the 25 years of legacy that they've created and they've built this business. And that was important on both sides. And we worked out that we kind of started to chunk it up into percentages. So X percent was a payout, and we worked out what that was. And then the founders retained some equity in the business. So they retain 5% each, and then they have a put and a call option over a period of time. And then when the business gets revalued, they'll be able to either buy in or continue to buy in or sell their stake in the business. Then there is a deferred element that is linked to collective targets. So if we hit certain milestone targets over a period of time, there's another unlock of capital that gets released. And then there is, salary and bonus and other kind of other ongoing benefits that we got, that we created. And what that's ended up doing is it's aligned all of us on the growth of the business. It's been aligned in terms of skill sets and accountability. So I brought a certain set of skills to the party that were complementary to the two founders. They've stayed in the business, and we've been very clear on kind of their roles versus my roles as the business grows and scales, which has worked really well. Like we definitely went through a bit of a norming storming aspect at the start. Like they've run this business successfully for 25 years. So it's the first time they've had a quote unquote boss, although I see it as a partnership with the two of them. But ultimately the decisions are now mine because I've put the biggest skin in the game to acquire the company. They've been super respectful of that post acquisition. So a lot of those principles that we put in place at the start have been really important for the relationship all the way through. Because I think if I could have pushed harder, for example, on less cash up front or higher incentivized year two exit, and it would have just probably caused friction and animosity in the working relationship. And I just didn't want that. I just think it's a bad place to go. I know some private equity firms or hedge funds, they can be a bit more aggressive because they've probably got a bit more buying power and capital and structure. But I kind of like to approach it from a partnership perspective.
Interesting. And how do you think that transition was for them going from, because if it was as though it's like someone sells you their home that they've lived in for 25 years, but then can come back to visit as a guest to an extent.
Yeah. Or they're renting a room.
Yeah, exactly. They're renting a room. Better said. How do you, I guess, psychologically, how do you think you adapted to that?
Honestly, it took a while because I was still finding my feet as CEO and had a vision for what I wanted the business. That it's a learning and development consultancy, so it was nicely in my sweet spot of being an ex-consultant, but there was a bit for me to learn in terms of the type of work that we won, the clients, getting to know the people. The people in the business have been there anywhere from like 4 years to 24 years. So some of the people have been with them from day one. So there was a personal transition. I wanted to spend time at the start getting to know the business and the clients and how we worked as a business. speaking to clients about why they worked with us and why we won business. But I would say it probably took me about 6 to 9 months to really feel comfortable to then go have conversations with prospective clients, or feel like I had enough background and context. And they were really helpful and they were super respectful. They never really pushed, or they never really undermined me. It was very clear to the team that I was the owner and they were there to support me. And they've been great partners in the sense of I asked them for advice. And there's probably some things where I moved a little bit too quickly, because that's my inclination at times, to the point we're making right at the start. There are times sometimes where going slow to go fast is probably the right thing to do. And they let me make those mistakes. They probably could have been much clearer and said, Toby, that's the wrong thing to do. They let me make that mistake in a safe environment. There was no impact to the people or the clients, but I kind of needed to make those like small mistakes. And then we've kind of evolved that from there to the point where they could have left after a year. There was a clause in the contract. They only had to stay a year post acquisition. And we've renegotiated the contracts for them to stay, because it's been mutually beneficial both for the business and the people and the clients. And it's been a good working relationship. And like, you'll know this probably better than I do. Like, doing this and leading a business is pretty lonely, or it can be lonely at times, particularly when the buck stops with you. So having people that you can trust and have been through it, and sometimes when I'm panicking that a client's moved a date or a contract's not going to get renewed, they're very calming. I mean, they've been through recessions and COVID, and the business has been absolutely fine, and they just remind me of that. Yeah.
And looking ahead, so you've got the two co-founders there helping you. What does the growth strategy look like over the next 12 months? Is the business just reliant on its reputation, referrals, or are you devising and developing new strategies that are go-to-market based?
Yeah, so there's kind of three aspects that we're looking at, and we actually just had our team day yesterday where we started to think about what's the plan for 2026, putting that together. So our business is a referral based business, but the great thing about the work that we do, I think we've got over 10 clients that have been working with the business for over 20 years because of the quality of service that they get. And we're a very people focused business. So, people like working with people, and it's about building those trusted relationships. And I think if you can do that, which I think I've successfully done over my consulting career, then you're more likely to be successful. So our general approach from a growth perspective is continue to deliver excellent work with our current clients and let that organic word of mouth. And we get a lot of referrals between clients and competitors, which is quite strange. I would not have seen that necessarily in my old consulting career, but learning and development and research, the two areas we play in, seem to be slightly different. There's more of an ecosystem. So we really are all about exceptional delivery to our clients. And our big position, and it's a genuine one, is that we believe that people are the greatest asset of any business, regardless of whether you're a tech business or a very people focused business. And we help our clients make good people great. And we do that through very customized learning and development solutions. And then the second part of the growth strategy is more propositional. So we've kind of got 4 key areas that we're looking to double down on from a growth perspective in terms of the content. So the first is around AI, and it feels like one of those, I don't love talking about it in the sense of it, everyone's talking about AI and what you should do. Now, our position on it is technologies can be fairly commodity, and technology is there to enable people, not necessarily replace people. But there is a big, fear maybe is too strong a word, but the people I speak to at C-level and executive level, they're really grappling with what that means to their business. And someone said something to me today with regards to AI. They're like, AI is not a change initiative. It is going to be an evolution of what you do. And it's about giving people the skills and behaviors to be able to deal with that level of change happening so rapidly. So we're working with quite a few clients on what does AI mean for their business specifically, because you can immerse yourself in AI content forever on YouTube and LinkedIn, but it is not contextual to a door manufacturer in Bolton who's doing 25 million of revenue, has 200 people in a warehouse. A 23-year-old building an agentic AI in NAN looks great, but the application of that into a a complex business. It's like flying a plane and changing the wings at the same time. So helping our clients through that from a skills and behavior perspective. And then we're doing a significant amount of kind of work within team development, but in terms of working with high performing teams. So a lot of partnerships, a lot of private equity firms, a lot of consultancies where we help them work through. We do this. It's not for everyone, but we take them on what's called a clarity day, where we do an intense workout in the morning, personal trainer, and it helps kind of build from a team perspective. And then we do an afternoon of objective setting, team charter, ways of working, behavioral pieces, and then we overlay a tool called Luminous Spark, which is a personality profiling tool, which is really, really powerful when you kind of put those two things together. So working with high performing teams. And the last proposition that we are seeing a lot of traction around is one that we call the human advantage, but it's really about developing people and skills in service-based businesses where genuinely you are selling people to people, and how do you differentiate as a consultancy when information and is so easy to get hold of, and how do you apply skills and behaviors and knowledge to really stand out. So we design very, very bespoke, contextual, real life training. So we've just delivered one where we took a team off site for 2 days, had a case study running throughout of it. We got clients to come in that they had to pitch to. We've got specialists. We had a professional comedian come in and teach them about improvisation and storytelling, and really bring into life how they can be better at their jobs. And then the third part of the growth, which is quite early stages, is I would love to do additional acquisitions into the current business to scale it inorganically as well. And we're just kind of looking at what that could mean over the next kind of 6 to 12 months.
Tons of moving pieces there. Toby, what's next for you and where can people find you?
What's next? Busy Q4 trying to close off the year, as you'll know, and then planning for 2026. I mean, there's lots and lots going on from a business perspective, so it's super exciting. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so Tobias Henry on LinkedIn. And if anyone's interested about the work that we do or anything I just mentioned, I'm Toby H at acceleratorsolutions.com. So give us a follow, go check the website out or reach out. That'd be awesome.
Toby, it's been a pleasure having you on.
Perfect. Cheers, Joe. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your Friday.